Hello and very warm welcome to another video based on part 4 of Ahmed Ali's novel Twilight in Delhi. I have already recorded videos on many parts of this novel, and this is going to be the last one for the benefit of my students and for understanding and analysis of this novel for the researchers as well. Right now we are on part 4 of this novel. The part 4 is the concluding part, and so it carries number of messages in it. The novelist has been of the plan that he used first part in order to tell us the background of the novel, and the second part was used to talk about the colonialism in India and the struggle of survival of the people of India and the Muslims of India especially in order to maintain their culture or their civilization, whatever they had. And then the third part was again dedicated to the background culture of the marriages, of the gatherings of the people and meetings, and the street life of whatever it was present in case of Muslim Mughals, and the deterioration which was coming to that also has been talked about with reference to Asghar, his marriage, his wife Bilqis as well. And then on part 4, once again the writer reminds us why the novel is being written here. So let us dig deep into the text in order to find out what is the content and the purpose of the part 4 of this novel. For this purpose, I'm taking you to the text of the part 4, so look at that. So it's here, part 4, no candle burns upon my grave, no blows drooping rose, and no moth burns its wings in the flame, nor the bulbul sings its vows. That is the lines taken from Zebun Nisa. And so this is the start, and that start can reveal number of things to the clever reader why these poetic lines have been used. Ahmed Ali is of the habit to describe many things under the cover of poetry. That's a very good tool of expression right that time and even now. Well, the first chapter begins with a reminder of the heat. And I should say that my students and my audience may be remembering that even the very first and start of the book was done with the description of the heat which was present there. And after that, the second part didn't have that type of excessive heat. And then third part again has some kind of heat present there. And the fourth part, once again, heat. So it goes to show that the path of Delhi life was replete with the heat and hot season, and therefore it becomes a characteristic feature of the life at Delhi at that time also, and even now that there is a plenty of heat available. And so the poet has used some time in order to indicate how the heat was present there. For example, the poet is saying that the summer of 1918, the novelist is saying the summer of 1918 was more terrible than the summers of the previous years. Each year we say the same thing, that this year heat is so much available, but it's a kind of reminder, kind of connection between part 1 and the last part. The real passage that we should be dedicated to is here, and that I need to read for the benefit of my readers. Nature herself was rebellious and seemed angry with the people of Hindustan. Hundreds and thousands of Indians had been killed in the war, acting as fodder to the German guns. But not content with this, and as it were filled with anger against the inhumanity of man, nature wanted to demonstrate her own callousness and might. Influenza broke out in epidemic form, and from the houses in Mahalla all around, heart-rending cries of lamentation and weeping began to rend the air. There was hardly any house where a death did not take place. Shamas lost his wife and in his grief became more mystical and religious than ever. Every evening he went to the cemetery and sat by his wife's grave for hours, seeing the day die and night spread her veil of darkness and gloom over the grief-stricken earth. Now, if we look into the lines of this passage, it's a very significant passage because it goes to talk on the one hand about the colonialism and imperialism and the resulting wars. We know that in the timing which is being talked about, as we saw that in the first passage, the timing was there, it's 1918. So First World War was going on at that time, the 1920s, and the war was causing number of deaths and the bloodshed everywhere was present. But then for us, the significant thing is that the English people were ruling here in India and they were at war with the Germans, and English people had recruited a large number of people from India, which is being called here as Hindustan. These people were dying here and there, and they were giving their lives for the sake of English people who were only imperialist in their country. So that is why the poet has referred to a bitter fact of colonialism and the wars which bring death to the people. And he also highlights this fact that not only the the war was killing the people, epidemics were there, and these epidemics were spreading here and there, and they were also killing the people. Influenza, for example, had broken out, and in that way, number of deaths were happening. And as the writer says, that there was no house where one death at least was not possible. So it's a type of epidemic which happened at that time, and that epidemic was influenza at that time, and now we are giving it a different name, that is COVID-19 or corona, this variant of the same influenza that was untreatable at that time. And so number of people died at that time, and number of people are dying right now. So in that regard, Ahmed Ali's novel Twilight in Delhi can be linked with the epidemic novels and stories and narratives, as we shall be finding later on about the COVID environment under which the different type of writings are coming up. Though now it's only in the digital form most of the time. It's very little like these novels, but very soon these novels will continue to come and explain the life of the people under the influence of COVID. So here one example has also been given, that Shamas' wife was lost and he was also visiting the grave of his wife. So one can see that such passages which come up across, they reveal the misery of the people, caused not only by the war but also by the epidemic. And alongside that, this pandemic, we can feel the other side, where the rule of the Muslims had been finished and the culture was finished and civilization was finished. Whatever the hand may be, that was the trouble also going on. The colonialism came like a pandemic, or these epidemic like came it brought along with it number of other things as well, and influenza was one of the things which came with the colonialist master, and so the people were suffering. So in this way, the writer is trying to point out that the sufferings which came to the people in the early 20th century, it was not only because of their own doing and undoing, but also because of the colonial master who put the people in the war and who brought many pandemic diseases as well. So in this way, this paragraph highlights the situation of the people who were living under plague at that time and were suffering a lot. The writer continues on the next page, 242, by saying that it was difficult to find even 3 yards of ground to put a person in his final resting place in life. They had no peace, and even in death there seemed no hope or rest. This paragraph, these few lines are important only with the fact that they highlight the number of deaths which were taking place. I mean, so many deaths were taking place that there was no place left in the graveyards that the dead should be buried there. So in that way, the writer wants to highlight the number of deaths, the quantity of death which is taking place, and the ravage and destruction and bloodshed which was happening because of all that had combined hands together in order to kill the humanity. So suffering of humanity under the pandemics have been highlighted in these such passages. With the same spirit, if we continue with that, we can see not only Muslims were unhappy on that, but also the Hindus were unhappy. But Hindus were at a privilege because they were not required to bury their dead. They were required to, burn out or cremate their dead ones, and so they didn't face this type of problem. They just cremated the people and dead people and threw them into the river later on. Whatever remains were left there. But it was the problem with the Muslims, because Muslims were burying their people. Not only this, but also the writer is now reflecting on the behavior of human beings who were very much Muslim and who were very much active during the Ramadan and who were doing everything good. But actually there were many malicious people among the Muslim as well, that in India they were found that if the deaths were taking place in such a way, these people, these evil mongering people would dig up the graves and would steal the shrouds from there. So the shroud thieves appeared there. What a kind of bad thing was done by these people. But then these people also existed in that India of Muslim Mughals. And that goes to show that the reaction to the pandemic or reaction to the large scale deaths of the people should have been like a very serious one, very sensitive one, like praying to God, like making treatment, like creating unity among the people in order to survive together. There were the people who were doing bad things like shroud thieving, and that was something really very awesome and gruesome being performed by these people, and the writer has pointed out to the evil side of these people as well. So with these ideas, the writer continues deep down and refers to the animals also, when, for example, one grave was dig up and after that the coffin or the shroud was taken away. the animals like hyenas and jackals, they would come up because digging the grave would become easier for them because of the activity of the thieves, and they would pull out the dead bodies and they would eat them as well. So in that way, it was a kind of punishment from nature, that the people who were on the ground, they were also being killed by nature because of the disease, because of the hunger, because of the problems. But the people inside the graves, they were also being re-killed, they were eaten by the animals, and they were deprived of the, deprived of the shrouds or the coffins as well. Now this thing is being pointed out by the writer, that it is the human being who made the way for the animals, ferocious animals, to let them dig the grave and bring the dead bodies out. So in that way, very gruesome, very cruel situation of the mankind, and the punishment from the side of nature has been pointed out. Same was the case with the grave diggers, for example. The next paragraph, last paragraph on this page, indicates that the grave diggers also had increased their rates, and they were demanding higher rates, and sometimes they were not even ready to dig the grave in a proper way, and they may, create such a situation in which everybody was grabbing money, everybody was showing its greed. For example, here in this paragraph, if you read, this is about the grave diggers. The grave diggers would not only demand high price of grave digging, but also they would sometime put the body in the grave without digging it properly, without making it properly, and as a result, the grave would fall down, and they would bring another dead body to be put there. Sometime they would remove some dead body, or as the animals would remove the dead body, another dead body was put into the same grave. So in this way, lots of things which were bad actually that were going on. So we were, at that time, we were doing the business of the dead, not even the business of the living, but the dead. The living were trying to thrive on the dead bodies of the people, and in this way, how much people were hurt, how much they had to be careful about their dead bodies, and how to be there in that way. The grave diggers were also doing as bad thing with the people as possible. Not only this was the problem, there was another problem as well. The clothes which was required to put on the bodies of the dead people, that with the passage of time became very costly. And so the Hindu shopkeepers, for example, which have been called as banias here, they also raised the prices, and they gave the clothes at a very high price, and those charged a lot of money. And if somebody would complain to them, and they would say, okay, buy the cheaper cloth or bury the dead one without any cover at all. And even if they gave some clothes at a low price, they would give a very bad quality of the clothes, which would be torn out very soon. So in that way, they were also making and minting money because of the deaths of the people. So this has been a norm perhaps in the whole world, that if somebody dies, it opens the way for the income of somebody else, and this was happening in India at that time also. So the shopkeepers and other people also got the same thing. Not only this was the case with the people who were having shops, and they were also selling the clothes, but also ghasals, which are actually the people who gave bath to the dead bodies among the Muslims. They were called as the ghasals. These ghasals, for example, they were all the time ready and waiting that somebody should call them and give bath to the dead body, and at that time they would remove any gold or any silver which was present there, and didn't give bath in order to purify the body, but just to threw water on them. And their main purpose therefore was not to give a ready good bath to the people. Instead, they wanted to get the gold from there, and then even had higher rates of giving bath. So all these things combined together. For example, Delhi Banias, for example, the grave diggers, for example, the ghasals, the bathers or the bath givers to the dead bodies. All these people were minting money because of this misfortune, this pandemic which had come in the shape of influenza upon the people. You see, people, human nature is all the time similar everywhere. For example, even today, if we look at the pandemic, we can see that some people are thriving very much, while other people are losing their piece of bread as well. Their short businesses, their small businesses are closing, and they are suffering, and they are now selling their belongings at a very low rate. Same is happening everywhere. Same had been happening all the time in the world. If we are reading this novel, it means we are at least going back 100 years. 100 year back also, same was the type of situation, that everybody minted money at the cost of the dead bodies, and people were there in order to spend money as much as possible, because it has to be done. And many people would say, why people cannot spend money on their dear ones when they have died? So in that way, emotionally they were blackmailed. So these are the things which were existing at that time also, and they are existing even now also. So that is why I can say that universality of the approach of Ahmed Ali can also be considered here, that what he said in the beginning of 20th century is very much right even today. So that was the situation in 1918 when British were ruling over the country and they were fighting the war, and that was the condition of the Mughal culture, Muslim people, that everybody had become greedy, everybody was trying to show as much greed as possible. So that chapter throws a lot of light on this type of situation and closes with the reminder of the corona disease today that we are suffering, and we are also doing the same thing, but we are at least better scientifically equipped, and we have got certain vaccines as well. But still, there is a large number of people who are dying, and so ironically speaking and metaphorically speaking, the novelist has used the angels' names. One is that of Israel, angel of death. That Israel angel was so busy because it's his duty, as supposedly we believe that his duty is to finish the life of the people or get the soul of the people. He was traveling from one door to door and going here and there, and in that way everybody was dying, lots of people were dying. And it goes to remind us very quickly that we are also living in the same situation. Corona is being revisited in these parts of the text by Ahmed Ali. So, in that way, the very poor condition of the human life against these pandemics have been pointed out. And exactly, it has been said that this is the nature which had become angry with the people, and that is why it was doing this kind of thing. Today, we also need to remind ourselves perhaps this is the anger. The name of Israel that has been used is not simply that Ahmad Ali might have seen Israel doing this thing and that thing. It is metaphorically being used that people were dying and Israel therefore was coming to get the souls of the people. So that is the introduction. That is the first chapter of part 4, and from here one can very easily realize what is the writer trying to say, what is the kind of situation in which we are present. So one can see that after this very bitter, very gruesome reminder to us people, the writer proceeds to write the second chapter. The second chapter will also take us to Bilqis once again, who was the object of love for Asghar. But in this part of the text, we will find that she also falls ill, and her illness is so great, so heavy, that she ultimately dies. It is partially, sometimes it is said that Asghar was not paying her attention as much as possible. But the disease was mainly responsible for that, and that is why if anybody would come to ask her how she was, she would not reply. And even if she would say, she was okay. Even she replied to Dilchain that she was okay. Begum Mir Nihal was semi-blinded, so she couldn't realize. But these things have been going on for a very long time. And Bilqis fell ill, and every other body also fell ill. And in that way, the fear of the disease was everywhere, as the fear of disease today is everywhere. So one paragraph, if we pay our attention here, that will reveal all this situation. This is taken from chapter 2 of part 4 of this good novel, Twilight in Delhi by Ahmed Ali. At last, Begum Shahbaz fell asleep at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Bilqis felt her breath sticking in her throat and she called out, "Is someone awake?" She did not call anyone by name and no one woke up. She called again, but there was no reply. The third time she called out a little louder than before. Masroor woke up and asked her, "What is this, sister-in-law? Will you please call your brother?" Masroor felt there was something unearthly in her voice, and he woke Asghar up. "What is the matter? Is everything all right?" he asked in a frightened voice. So that is the passage which goes to indicate the condition at the home of Mir Nihal. The newly married bride Bilqis is present, but she has fallen ill and she is suffering from with the same disease. And it is the fear of the disease which makes Begum Shahbaz feel very fearful, and she was very fearful of catching this disease. So that is why she was all the time trying to cover herself from both the sides with human beings, and she was thinking and praying to God that she might not fall ill. But the poor condition of Bilqis has been pointed out here, that at the mid of the night she wakes up and she tries to call somebody, but nobody answers. And it's then at last, Masood, the boy, the young boy who is now grown up, that boy has been called by her that the husband, Mr. Asghar, should be called so that she can talk. But the boy says that he heard something unearthly in the voice of Bilqis, and that goes to show that something wrong was going to happen to Bilqis, and therefore the novelist is preparing us for the death of Bilqis. So, love of someone is very easy to be killed in the novel, as it happened in case of the first part of the novel when Baban Jan had died. And now we are seeing that another beloved, that is the that died also in the last chapter. That was again a very much loved wife. She had died, and now it is Shamas's wife it was, and now it is Asgar's wife is going to die. So the women were equally suffering, and women were equally having the problem with the disease. So in that way, when Masrur calls Asghar, Asghar comes there, and the death happens in a very, very traditional fashion. For example, this paragraph throws light very graphically on the mode of death when she died. An unnatural loneliness filled the house. Asghar came near Bilqis and saw her face in the dim starlight. She looked ghastly and pale. The pallor of death was on her face and a peculiar expression in her eyes. She had perhaps sensed the approach of death and felt the breath rattling in her throat. And when she spoke, there was something uncanny in her voice. I am going, she said calmly, as if she had overcome all sense of regret and loss. Goodbye, forgive me my faults, and take care of Jahan Ara, please. So that paragraph shows the ending circumstance and moments of the death of Bilqis. This is very important here, that she was able to call her husband at the last time, and she called when the husband came. She told to him that she was going to die. It's a kind of realization that someone at the time of death may realize that death is going to come. Once again, the traditional belief is being repeated by the novelist. Bilqis therefore reminded her husband that she had been his wife, but she was sorry for not being that wife, for not being surviving there, and therefore she said goodbye. But she asked for the promise from Asghar to take care of Jahara, who was the daughter who had born to this Asghar and his wife Bilqis, and that is why before her death she shows her motherly instinct by pointing out that Asghar should take care of Jahara. And with these words, this is very strange that the woman dies, and so Asghar is left alone. Although Asghar was not having that type of attachment in those days with his wife Bilqis, but when she died, it was really very important for him that she has died, and therefore he felt extremely sad. And it was the very cruel, very, very gruesome and very cruel moment that he had to hold her hand, that he had to hold her at the time of death, and he could feel how death came to her in his very arms. He felt that his wife had died. So that is the kind of tragedy which is being reported here. If we see it symbolically, definitely Bilqis is the beauty of Delhi, and Delhi is dying in the hands of Asghar. Asghar is the representative of the second generation of Muslim Mughals who had prepared themselves in order to face the colonialism. The colonialism was gradually killing the very beauty of Delhi, and it had killed in the very hands of the people who were present there. So, not only symbolically, but actually, the death of Bilqis has happened, and Asghar has become once again a lonely person. So, let's see what happens in chapter 3 when the grief of Asghar is quite important. In order to understand this grief, I think it's very good to read these lines. For example, the writer says, "Go my life, and may God be with you. The parted will meet one day, fate will allow. Pain and sorrow and cruel fate have brought me well nigh to a lifeless state, but do not say that love is false, my dove. I have shown you how they die in love." The song reminded Asghar of his indifference towards Bilqis and of her deep and sincere love for him. His heart was saddened, and when he reached the grave, he wept and prayed long for forgiveness of his sins. So this is the paragraph. It goes to relate one thing, that okay, it was the disease, but it was the contribution of his indifference to Bilqis as well in the ending days of Bilqis, that he was not that much attached to her, though he loved her in the beginning. But because of shyness of Bilqis, he had taken a different point of view of Bilqis and was keeping away from Bilqis. So in that way, she was sad and upset also. One of the possible reasons of her disease, or one of the possible reasons of her sadness. But then after death, Asghar became very sad and asked all the time, sought for the forgiveness from Bilqis. But then it's a reality that during life we do not value anything, but somebody when dies, we all say that person was very good. That's the human behavior, and the similar human behavior is being pointed out here. So Ahmed Ali can be called a very good reader, very good critique of the human behavior. After the death of Bilqis, Asghar is loving her, and the same love he could not shower on her when she was alive. So here is chapter 4, and that chapter 4 again brings us back to Mir Nihal. And one can see that Mir Nihal, who was young at the time of the start of the story, so much time has passed, and therefore Mir Nihal is also now very weak, and his body is very weak now. He's unable to move, unable to say his prayers, unable to take any rounds of the house, unable to really, take active part in life. So that is why he is a very old person. The writer has come back in order to make us understand what has happened to Mir Nihal. He is now the symbol of dying culture of India. and that is very weak and very much close to the death. So he remembers his friends. For example, Mir Sangi had died, Redbeard had come too old to go about, and same was the case with Kambal Shah. Mir Nihal, therefore, is in very good, very poor condition all the time. He remembers the people around him, the events around him. He remembers his youthful time, he remembers his old time, and then he understands the political situation. For example, he talks about the home rule, that the movement had started for home rule, and that movement was required to take part by the Muslim also, by the Hindus also, but Mir Nihal was unable to do so. So in that way, writer is referring to the freedom movements which was taking ground at that time. So a lot of political history has been debated, a lot of political history has been repeated by the novelist. So here we can see that the wave of freedom among the people of India, may they be Muslim or Hindus, that was generating, that was increasing, and it was the sad affair for Mir Nihal that he couldn't become the part of that. So in that way, Mir Nihal is retracting. The next generation is taking part of Mir Nihal, and the new movement that is coming up also, that is being referred to in this part of the text. For example, here is a very good paragraph that should be read out. New ways and ideas had come into being. A hybrid culture which had nothing in it of the past was forcing itself upon Hindustan. A hodgepodge of Indian and Western ways which he failed to understand. The English had been beaten by the Turks at Gallipoli. Even this had not affected his heart. He had become feelingless and was not interested. Whether the caravan stayed or moved on, the old had gone and the new was feeble and effete. At last, at least, it had nothing in common with his ideals or his scheme of things. Two parts of this paragraph should be understood. Number one is that because of colonialism, the culture of Indian Muslims and Indian Hindus, or in collective we may call Indians, that had become a hybrid culture. That's a mixture of the English culture, of the Indian culture. So in that way, a cultural intervention had taken place as it happens most of the time. Wherever the colonial master goes, the cultural intervention is definitely possible. And because of this intervention, the local culture would be 100% destroyed, and the mixing of the habits and traditions and customs of the appearance of style of the overpowering culture dominates there. So the same has happened in India, that people were now wearing the dresses of the English people, speaking in the style of the English people, and trying to get the feeling and emotions in the same way as the English people have. But some people were there who also wanted to get rid of the English people, and so the movement had started. Mir Nihal was very weak, therefore he was not interested in that. Even when his son Asghar came before him wearing the English dress, he wouldn't say anything, although he was a lover and supporter of the culture of the Muslim Mughal people and never liked the British people. But even these things could not stir him, could not make him stand up, because he was so weak to take part in that. It was the job of the new people, but according to the writer, the new people were already feeble and weak and were not able to take active part in that. But still, the defeat of the English people could be marking something very special, could be telling something that will happen for the freedom of India, and that very thing is being pointed out here. Historical facts are present here, like the English were defeated by the Turks in Gallipoli. It's the Muslim, Turks are the Muslim, and that is why other conquests and defeats have not been talked about. Only this has been talked about, perhaps because of the affiliation of Ahmed Ali with the Turkish people, as everybody Muslim is having there. So in that way, the indication of certain historical facts has also been given. Well, if we continue with this chapter, we can have a very little understanding here from 3-4 lines what had happened on the great poets of Hindustan. Where were Mir, Ghalib and Insha? Where were Dard and Sauda, or even Zogan? They weren't gone. With them was the wealth of poetry. Now Mir Nihal is thinking about the poets of India. Yeah, and the writer therefore is also thinking the same way, that poetry is being regarded here as the asset of India. The poets were regarded here as the assets of India and the Hindu and Muslim culture. But then every poet has died. Insha, Ghalib, Zog, everybody has died. And Mir Nihal therefore feels very much lonely and forlorn, and therefore wishes that these people should have been present, because they were the harbingers of the culture of the Muslim people, Muslim Mughal people especially. Now they are dead, and so it is increasing the sorrow and sadness of Mir Nihal as well. So in that way, we are seeing that the chapter is trying to close itself, and something about Dilchan has also been repeated here, that she was also sick and she was walking all the time with the stick. Begum Mir Nihal, is very poor in condition, and Masroor has also left the studies because he failed in the examination and was trying to do some business. He was quarreling with the people, and that is why he was not feeling happy. So no one is happy in the end of the story. Mir Nihal is unhappy, Begum Mir Nihal is unhappy, and Shams is also unhappy. That is Asghar also very much unhappy. In this way, the four chapters close, and the fifth chapter again gives us another wave of happiness when we think of Asghar and his life and the life of his daughter Jahan Ara, who was being taken care by Zohra. And Zohra was, as the paragraph tells us, had grown into a beautiful girl of 16, and her charm seems to be greater than those of Bilqis. She was conscious of her sex, and there were an air of abandon about her. She looked at Asghar with admiring eyes and pitied him in his sorrow and loneliness. Asghar had also become aware of her presence, and when she came, his heart was filled with a secret joy. Now, this could be taken as the other romance by Asghar, but this time the romance is not out of his greed for the girl, but it is because of his daughter also, who is very young when the mother has died, and Zohra definitely, being the khala and auntie and sister of Bilqis, is feeling good emotion for the young girl, and she wants to take care of her. And Asghar possibly also is thinking on the same lines, and perhaps he is young and romantic and needs the love of a girl, and the girl also needs the love of the mother. So Zohra can be possibly a very good person who can fill the gap of Bilqis, but then we need still to see what was the path being adopted, what was the way being done by Asghar, what Zohra was doing, how she was feeling. Actually, it is the motherly skill and motherly characteristic of Zohra which will definitely prepare her to marry Asghar and take care of that Jahara, the little daughter, as well. So, entry of Zohra, the sister of Bilqis, is again here, and the traditional kind of thing is going to take place, that if the elder sister dies, the younger sister would be ready to marry. That kind of things have been happening, and the same thing is being told to us in this part of the book as well. Now, the second page of this chapter, this is 255 page, continues to discuss the attraction between both the people, and Zohra was feeling. And for example, here in the ending portion, if you read Zohra's heart also gave a leap, but she was smitten with shame and sense of guilt, and quickly she disentangled herself. So attraction in both the part and love in both the part is there, but Zohra, being a very shy girl like her sister, was unable to show her emotion, and rather she became upset when Asghar showed her his interest in her, and she ran away and disappeared, as Asghar's repeated efforts could not bring her forward. So in this way, another love affair continues. Jahara, the daughter, for example, one day in this passage, for example, we find that one day Jahara fell into the ground water, and she was dirty and she was crying, and that was Begum Shahbaz trying to make her good, and Chambeli was also trying to make her good, and Asghar himself, and everybody tried that she should feel good, but she always said she wants to see her aunt Zohra Begum. Zohra Begum was called, but Zohra did not come, and rather she said that instead she should come there. Jahara should be sent there. But then Zohra was very fond of Jahara, and ultimately, when the girl was not feeling satisfied, and Asghar had said that he will take care of take care of Jahara, his daughter, himself. At that time, Zohra became very, upset, and in her upsetness, she landed into the house of Asghar, and Asghar immediately asked the same thing: "Why you did not come for so many days when you had ignited some kind of love in his heart?" And the reply of Zohra was that she is also ready for that. Since that day, love established its claims on their hearts and swayed them with its enchanting melodies. Zohra was young and beautiful, and under the shadow of love's tapering flame, Asghar seemed to find happiness at last. Hardly 6 months had passed since Bilqis' death, yet he was thinking of marrying again. How cruel is the heart of man. Well, there's a punching line in the end, but before that, we can understand that Zohra also became ready to marry Asghar, and Asghar was also feeling in love with that girl once again. And this time, Jahara, the young daughter, will also be satisfied with the presence of Zohra. But then the writer has put the last line: "How cruel the heart of man is." And I have written, is that so? Is the heart of man cruel, or woman is also included in that? But these things continue to happen in the novels and stories and short stories. It may not be happening in the real life, but in the actual life, this is the case, that men and women need each other in order to live their life. And that is why perhaps sometimes we blame men for their remarriages, and sometimes we blame women for their remarriages. But this is a human factor and it has to continue. So in that way, a wave of happiness in this chapter has been found. Although the start of this part of the book was very sad and this thing makes us happy, we feel good about the change which is going to come in the life of Jahara, Asghar, and Bilqis. Love is going to sprout and flourish as well. So that is the 5 chapter we have covered, and next time we need to cover the whole remaining chapters, inshallah. So my students, here I am going to have a stop for the closing of this video. I hope so that every one of you have learned about the closing chapter. It is related to the problems of the people because of the pandemic disease influenza. It is related with the life of the people who are who are very greedy and money making and money mongering people who want to mint money at every cost, may it be at the cost of the dead people as well. So not only this, but also the death of Bilqis on the one hand, and the remarriage of Asghar, how life is. On the one hand, we have death, and on the other hand, we have the love matter supporting once again. These chances keep on happening. Somebody dies, somebody lives, and that is the life of the human being. And so, in that way, Mir Nihal's poor condition, Begum Mir Nihal's poor condition, and the condition which is becoming very old of the people, that has also been pointed out. It means that the old age is, finishing, and the new age is going to flourish. That possibly can be related to the colonial era as well. Colonial master has been ruling, but this age is causing the freedom movements, and that is why new age is going to sprout up out of the old age, which is going to finish. That is also one of the indication towards the closing or the end of the colonial system in India, and the start of the freedom movement by the people, and ultimately winning of the freedom. So that is the thing which this 5 chapters discuss, and the remaining chapters we shall also discuss someday in another video. So far, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you will not forget to comment or put some idea on the video, and also you will be welcome if you subscribe my channel. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in some next video.